In the golden age of Hollywood, the Lavender Marriage was the industry's most effective weapon against the truth. It was a pact of silence, signed in ink and enforced by the threat of total ruin. For the American man who grew up believing in these cinematic romances, the truth is a bitter pill. But to understand the history of our country, we must understand the machinery of the illusion. Consider Rock Hudson. In the mid-1950s, he was the undisputed king of the universal lot, a towering presence, a leading man built for CinemaScope. He was the screen idol that men admired and women adored. But the man born Roy Scherer Jr. lived a life in direct opposition to the image sculpted for him by his agent, Henry Wilson. Wilson was a notorious kingmaker who specialized in taking handsome, unknown young men and erasing their pasts, giving them new names and new biographies. By 1955, the whispering campaign about Hudson's private life, his attraction to men, was becoming a roar in the gossip columns. Confidential magazine was preparing an exposé that would have ended his career instantly. The ultimatum was delivered in a wood-paneled office. Get married or get out. Hudson chose the former. He married Wilson's secretary, Phyllis Gates, in a ceremony that was more press junket than sacrament. The wedding, held in November 1955, was less a romantic union and more a tactical deployment. During their honeymoon in Jamaica, the studio sent a photographer to capture candid shots of the happy couple. Those close to the set noted that Hudson spent the majority of the trip in the company of the hotel's staff, while Gates was left to pose alone by the surf. When Gates eventually filed for divorce 3 years later, citing mental cruelty, the studio quietly paid her a settlement that ensured her silence for decades. The ring had served its purpose. It had protected the box office of pillow talk. The tabloids were silenced. Hudson's box office numbers climbed. He was safe, but the cost was a life lived in the shadows, a 3-year sham marriage that ended as quietly as it began once the danger had passed. Hudson played the role of the eligible bachelor for the rest of his life, a prisoner of his own marketable persona. Janet Gaynor was the industry's first sweetheart, the winner of the inaugural Academy Award for Best Actress. Her image was built on a foundation of purity and girl-next-door charm. But by the late 1930s, the whispers regarding her private life and her close female companions began to threaten her standing at the box office. The studio's solution was a marriage to Adrian, Hollywood's most celebrated costume designer. Adrian was the most famous costume designer in the world, the man who gave Greta Garbo and Joan Crawford their silhouettes. Both lived lives that the 1930s public would never have sanctioned. Their 1939 marriage was nicknamed the most tailored union in Hollywood. Adrian, known for his flamboyant personal style, suddenly began appearing in somber, traditional suits for the cameras. To further the illusion, the studio publicized the birth of their son, Robin, as a miracle of domestic bliss. Yet, the couple lived in a house designed by Adrian that featured separate bedroom wings connected only by a formal gallery. They remained married until Adrian's death in 1959, a testament to a mutual pact of professional survival. It provided Gaynor with a respectable domestic front and Adrian with a social shield. They remained married until his death, living a life of quiet, mutual protection, proving that in Hollywood the most important costume a designer ever created was a wedding suit. Robert Taylor and Barbara Stanwyck. In 1939, MGM faced a branding crisis. Robert Taylor, the man with the perfect profile, was being mocked by the press for his perceived prettiness. Simultaneously, Barbara Stanwyck, a woman of iron-willed independence, was facing scrutiny for her solitary lifestyle. Rumors about Taylor's private life were threatening his box office appeal as a rugged leading man. Louis B. Mayer, the patriarch of MGM, summoned them both. He didn't ask. He ordered. The solution? A 1939 wedding in San Diego, orchestrated by the studio. It was a marriage that lasted 11 years. A masterclass in public relations where the actors played their roles so convincingly, even they seemed to forget where the script ended and reality began. Their wedding in San Diego was a somber affair. Stanwyck, reportedly dressed in a simple suit rather than a gown, looked more like she was attending a deposition than a wedding. For 11 years, they lived on a sprawling ranch, but the house was divided. Guests noted that Taylor spent his time in the stables or flying his plane, while Stanwyck remained in her wing, focused on her work. When they finally divorced in 1951, Stanwyck famously wore black to the proceedings, mourning not the loss of a husband, but the end of a performance that had drained her spirit. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. Charles Laughton was a titan of the stage and screen, but he lived in a state of perpetual fear. In 1929, he married Elsa Lanchester, the future bride of Frankenstein. The marriage changed forever one night in 1931 when Laughton was arrested in a London park. He confessed the truth to Elsa the following morning. In a move of incredible grace and pragmatism, Lanchester did not leave. She realized that a divorce would destroy Laughton's burgeoning career. They entered into a working partnership. They became the industry's most respected intellectual couple, traveling the world and collecting art, while their private lives remained strictly separate. It was a sham to the public, but a deep platonic bond that lasted until Laughton's death. Rudolph Valentino and Jean Acker. The blueprint for the Hollywood sham marriage was drafted in the silent era. Rudolph Valentino was the great lover, the man who made the nation swoon. He was the man who defined screen passion, yet lived a life of constant speculation. The studio was terrified that his off-screen life would shatter the illusion of the exotic, available bachelor. In 1919, under immense pressure to appear settled, Valentino married actress Jean Acker. It is a wedding that holds a dark record in Hollywood history. On their wedding night, Acker famously locked Valentino out of their hotel room, refusing to consummate the union. The marriage effectively lasted only 6 hours before they separated. Yet, because of the strict morality of the time and the studio's fear of a failed idol, they remained legally bound for years. Valentino, the screen's greatest romantic, spent the height of his fame as a man, legally tethered to a woman who wouldn't even share a room with him. Cary Grant. Cary Grant was the gold standard of the American gentleman. But the man-born Archibald Leach was a master of reinvention, and his greatest invention was Cary Grant. For years, Grant lived in a beach house with actor Randolph Scott. The press dubbed it Bachelor Hall, but the studio saw a ticking time bomb. To neutralize the rumors, the studio machinery propelled Grant into a series of marriages, beginning with Virginia Cherrill. Despite the glamorous photos in photoplay, the mask slipped often. It was noted by those on the Paramount lot that Grant and Scott would often coordinate their film schedules just to spend more time together, even as the studio hired dates to escort Grant to premieres. He spent his life running from Archie Leach, trapped in a tuxedo that never quite fit his soul. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas. The world of music followed the same unspoken laws. Cole Porter wrote the most romantic songs of the century, lyrics that defined sophisticated love. He gave us the soundtrack to the 20th century, sophisticated, witty, and worldly. But his marriage to socialite Linda Lee Thomas was a masterpiece of a different kind. Their 1919 marriage was a lavender marriage of mutual benefit. Linda, a wealthy divorcee, sought a respectable companion who wouldn't demand the traditional expectations of a 1920s husband. Porter sought a shield that would allow him to move through high society untroubled. They were genuinely devoted to one another, but the marriage was a legal fortress. When Porter's legs were crushed in a 1937 riding accident, Linda was the one who fought the doctors to prevent amputation, saving his career. It was a union of two people who decided that a shared secret was a stronger bond than any traditional romance. Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine. Danny Kaye was the master of the patter song, a whirlwind of energy. But the engine behind the man was his wife, Sylvia Fine. She wrote his songs, she directed his career, and she managed his image with a cold, calculating eye. Their marriage was less a romance and more a professional merger. By the 1940s, they lived largely separate lives, with Kaye often linked to high-profile male colleagues. Yet, they never divorced. Sylvia knew that Danny's wholesome family man image was essential for his work with organizations like UNICEF. She remained his manager and wife until the end, proving that in Hollywood, a good manager knows that the most important contract is the marriage certificate. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli. By the mid-1940s, MGM needed to transition Judy Garland from the girl next door into a sophisticated leading lady. They needed her to grow up, and they decided she would do so next to director Vincente Minnelli. The marriage was heavily encouraged by the studio to provide Garland with stability following a series of nervous breakdowns. But Minnelli was a man of his own secrets, and the two were a mismatch of tragic proportions. During the filming of The Pirate, the tension reached a breaking point. Garland, fueled by studio-prescribed pills and the pressure of a marriage that felt like a set piece, reportedly found Minnelli in a compromising position with a male employee. The stability the studio bought was a fiction. The marriage collapsed under the weight of two people trying to play roles they were never meant to cast. We often look back at the Golden Age and see a time of simpler values and clearer truths, but the history of the Hollywood sham marriage tells us otherwise. These icons gave us everything. In return, we demanded they give up themselves. What does it reveal about our own history that we preferred the beautiful lie to the complicated truth? And as the vault closes for tonight, ask yourself, in an era of modern influencers and curated images, have the studios really gone away, or have they simply changed their names